All right, Kim, I'm super excited to have you as
Hi.
one of my first interviews to kick off my channel. Super excited. Now, how do you, I know you just recently got married. So how do you pronounce your last name?
Marinucci.
Marinucci. I take it he's Italian and is probably a great cook, right?
He's a fantastic cook, and yes, he is Italian. Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So Kim and I know each other by working at different PEO companies. And Kim has actually been in a senior level HR role and since 2013. Is that correct, Kim?
Yes. Yes.
Working for PEO companies.
Yes.
Yeah. So I find that it's quite interesting, HR consultants that actually work for a PEO company because they're working with so many different types of industries, different size of companies, all across the states. And I'm sure she has tons of stories to share. So she's been a senior level HR executive in the role. Her or her team has worked with clients in the professional employer organization model, and I'd love to just talk about some stories overall. I'm sure you and a lot of other HR professionals say that they can write a book on some of their stories that they have.
Yeah. Well, so I've been in HR for 26 years, and I've been in the PEO space for 16 years.
Okay.
And so primarily I've worked with clients primarily in the PEO space, working with them to, manage their account and help with their HR needs. And yes, I could write a book. I guess I don't know why I haven't become a professional writer. It makes for some good content. But I think that's what's the most fun about working at a PEO when you're an HR consultant, because you get the opportunity to take a look at a client's HR infrastructure and to see where there are potential gaps that you can fill with, a PEO has a variety of services that they can offer, but clients don't always need everything that you have to offer. What's neat
Right.
about it is you can tailor it to fit where the potential gaps are. And of course, from an HR perspective, the gaps we're looking for are compliance gaps, right? We want to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that they are in compliance with not only federal and state, but also municipalities, those local laws as well.
Right.
Um, Susanna, it's really funny because although I've been in HR for a long time, and I've been in the PEO space pretty long as well, I've never seen legislation roll out like it has since COVID. And I
Really.
mean, it's crazy. Yes. And the funny thing is, I remember years back, just a handful of years back, certain states would, you know, roll out a leave law maybe or whatever. Then COVID hit, and it's now all the states are rolling it out, and they're all starting to follow suit. The local laws, municipalities are now rolling out their own in addition to what the state or federal have. And so honestly, Susanna, I can't even keep track of it anymore. So like I used to be able to go, oh yeah, that one had, that
Mm-hmm.
state had it, and we can't do that anymore. And it's changing so rapidly. So we have obviously the resources and the information at our fingertips, but it used to be so little that you knew, like California, New York, they were crazy states, right? Like you
Right.
knew they
Right.
were, everything was happening there. But now it's other states,
So,
and it's, yeah, and it's, and it's not just leave laws, it's about pay to mitigate the pay inequity too, like between females traditionally were paid a lot less than men. And
right.
yes, they have the Equal Pay Act, but now it's, in a lot of states you can't ask what someone made before, because why does that matter what I made before? What does the job pay, right?
Exactly.
And so, and now you have to disclose it on your ads, in a lot of the states. So it's like, here's the pay range. So it's really amazing what we've seen happen that has really, just the canvas of legislation has just completely changed, right? The landscape of it, for sure.
So a lot more heavy burden on the employers, even outside of those heavy burden already states like
Yeah.
California and New York.
Yeah, and it used to be, Susanna, it's funny. I always said, man, I'm glad I'm in Florida, right? Because
Right.
it wasn't a very, I guess, legislative heavy state, right? You had some laws, of course, but it was a little more lenient and lax than a lot of the other states. But I'll tell you, if you work just in one state, it's hard enough. But if
Right.
you are in a state with, in multiple states,
Yeah.
I'm an HR professional, 26 years. I don't know that I could do it alone anymore because of what's happening. And it truly is what's the benefit of having, a PEO provider to help guide you and to lean on, right? When COVID happened, Susanna, what was funny about it is none of us knew what was going on. Even
Right.
HR professionals, it was like violating everything we knew as an HR professional. It was, it was like we were calling each other, asking them, "Hey, what does this mean? What's going on?" So yeah, it's really interesting. It's really interesting how that's
So,
happened and
so
what's
let's
happened.
talk about some stories, maybe during COVID, where you and your team really were able to help a company that had employees in multiple states and basically save them from some hot water. Can you think
Well,
of any?
a lot of it was too, especially with that because COVID leaves were crazy, right? So we helped to, we were able to get compliance teams. So PEOs typically have compliance backing, right? So
Right.
they were able to really kind of deep dive into the laws of what was happening so that they would call us because again, it was against everything we knew in HR. So they were
Right.
able to help us kind of go through and they were, they work very closely with legal teams and different things like that. So they were able to help us navigate that. So we could give solid, right, guidance to these clients to say, I wouldn't terminate that person right now, or, let's take a look at what's going on. And the funny thing too, Susanna, is that a lot of times when a client calls us, they're asking us a question, but they really are asking us just a piece of what's happening. They're not
Ah,
really giving us the whole story. So with an
um,
HR professional, what we do is we keep probing, right? So they'll say, "Hey,
to
I
get
need to
down
terminate
to
this
the real
employee. They're a horrible
story.
employee." And then I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, "Okay, they're a horrible employee. Tell me what's going on." "Oh, well, and they were, they were out for this thing, and then they were out for that." And I'm like, "Wait a minute, this sounds like a potential legislative nightmare. This could potentially be a lawsuit."
Right.
So, um, you know, we would,
So
I would say,
basically, you've saved your clients from getting a potential lawsuit due to just firing somebody that they probably shouldn't have.
well, correct. Yes. And we
Hmm.
can never guarantee that someone
Right.
won't file a claim, but we can help to mitigate it as long as they get us in the early stages. It's
Right.
when they have a complete mess and they've already done everything they've done. And all of a sudden they're like, "Hey, help me." And we're like, "We're going to guide you the best we can. It's pretty much out of our hands at this point. But, had you pulled us in sooner, we could give you options, right? We could say, hey, because what we do is we give you like the worst case scenario. Here's your options and here's what the possible expected outcome would be." And I mean, I had a guy that was trying to terminate someone, quote unquote, for poor performance. Next thing I know, I found out that she had had a claim. She felt harassed. She was on a leave and felt retaliated. All the things, right?
Right.
So, and they weren't even thinking like that. They were just, she's not a great performer. And I'm like, well, she may not be. First of all, you've got to prove she's not a great performer.
Hmm.
And
Get it in
even before,
writing. Right.
yes, and before that, you've just got to make sure that you documented all these things that you had before her claims, right? Because now when you're doing it after the fact, yeah, not great, right? So
Document, document, document.
yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So that leads me then to my next question, because I talk to so many different businesses that have employees in multiple states and they have an internal HR professional that handles it and they think that they're good. So tell me how you and your team with the PEO companies can actually partner with that internal HR person. You don't replace their position.
Yeah, I love this question, Susanna. It's one of my favorite questions. And you know why I love it? I love it because I was on the side of the employer for
Yeah.
many years. For oh gosh, I guess I did internal. Gosh, I don't even honestly. I'm starting to date myself. I'm gonna retreat.
You
Um,
started when you were in elementary school, right?
yes, right out of pre-K. Um, but yes, a lot of times, I found because I've also sold PEO too. And I think because I had the HR background, I was probably less threatening because I could tear down that wall immediately, because I could just look at the HR person and say, I'm taking my sales hat off right now. Let's talk about what you're dealing with right now. Let's talk about what's on your plate. So many times, Susanna, what's on their plate is everything, because nobody knows they give everything to the HR person. I mean, they become the professional party planner, the babysitter, policy writer, disciplinarian,
Yeah.
the gopher, the whole 9 yards, because nobody knows what to do, because they do everything on HR. And I can say that with all certainty, because that's kind of what happened with me. And, I like to just, which is why we love when you sales folks bring us in, because we can tear down that wall immediately, right? We can just say, hey, I got you. Like, I want to hear your pain. And I understand your pain because I've been there.
In there.
And so the last thing, truly, no matter what PEO they partner with, the last thing they want is to replace that person, because it's
Right.
not possible. There's nothing that replaces that person on site that gives that personal attention and that go between the company, the liaison between the company and the PEO. So we're never there to replace. And we tell them, if they ask us, well, should we? We're like, no. You need somebody there, and preferably somebody who has enough HR knowledge to. And then we get the opportunity to say, hey, I work for you. Like, we want to take the things off your plate that you don't like, you can't get to.
Right.
Because I remember I never could get the handbook updated. I had great intentions. All right. I had, failure comes with many great intentions, right? Like, I couldn't get the handbook done, couldn't get the job descriptions done, because I was hiring.
Because you get busy and get probably pulled in so many other different directions that are more top priorities. Is that correct?
Yeah. And honestly, even the larger you are, like, when you get large too, you got more people coming in and out of the door, right? You've got more claims coming in and out of the door. You got more orientations to do, all the things. So yeah, basically.
So do you think it's fair to say that if possibly instead of replacing an HR professional, if they can make it, if you join a PEO company, you might not have a need so an extensive team. For example, if they have 200 employees, maybe they don't need 3 or 4 people in HR. Maybe they only need 1 or 2. Is that fair to say?
That's really fair to say.
Okay.
That's more than accurate. And the reason is typically SHRM, the Society for HR Management, says that you need 1 HR professional for every 100 employees.
Okay.
We know that doesn't always happen because of budgeting, because of, the bottom line. And so the HR professional, just like I said, gets dumped with everything and trying to handle everything. And you can burn out your HR professional really quickly, right? And then they're at the same time, they're trying to fight for a seat at the table. So it's like, okay, I'm over here trying to hold like 8 buckets of water, but I'm also over here fighting a battle of trying to get to the table. And, you got to choose your battles. So,
right.
But what's great about this is not only do you get a person that is yours to do a lot of the administrative burden, to do a lot of the things that are so important, but we just never get to them as HR professionals. But also you get a team of people behind you for a lot less than you would pay to bring someone on. And you don't have to pay, you don't have a person there that you would pay, well into like, 70 something thousand to 100 and something thousand, depending upon the level that you want, because HR professionals are really calling a high ticket right now because of legislation. Also, the employer taxes, bennies, all the things, right? Overhead for space. What you've done is you've cut that in half or better to be able to have a payroll person, an HR professional, whatever you need to make that happen, so it's much less money in most cases.
Okay. Excellent. So you talked about a party planner. Let's talk about some Christmas parties. I hear that's typically a time of year that a lot of companies or employees get themselves in trouble. So you can share a story or best practices, anything that you can share there.
Christmas parties. Well, we love holiday parties. And we do love holiday parties. But at the same time, remember that, and oh gosh, I love this one. Oh, we could have a whole interview on this. And I would definitely be on camera because you'd want to see my face. But but for
Oh, I
sure,
can't wait to hear about it.
oh my gosh, there's just so many. But you know what happens, and what's really funny, Susanna, is a lot of people ask the question. They're like, well, we were at this thing, and somebody made a claim that I touched them inappropriately or whatever, but we were at a party, and so it doesn't count, right? Because it wasn't at the work office. Oh, yes,
Yes,
it
it
does.
does.
It does. And, especially if it was work sponsored for sure, right? But even if it's not on work site, even if it's
Right.
not company sponsored, you have an obligation to protect your team
Your
members.
employees. Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's off-site, on-site, company sponsored, not company sponsored. You have an obligation, right? And while
Right.
you can't control things that happen off-site or on their own time or whatever, if that employee has a problem with another employee off-site or whatever, it's your obligation to make sure that they're comfortable, at least while they're in the working environment. And so I love that question because I get that one a lot. And
Yeah.
yeah,
I
it's,
I've heard
yeah.
it a lot too.
Well, and holiday parties are prime spot for a lot of that to happen. People are drinking, their guards are down, they're not thinking. Companies are also, sometimes open bar and they're not managing that.
I
So
I was going to say, as an HR
uh,
professional, do you recommend that companies just have a limit on what they're offering as far as not making it an open bar?
I do personally.
Okay.
I mean, everybody loves an open bar. Let's be real, right? Nobody goes
Yeah.
to a wedding when it's a limited bar. You go to a holiday party, it's open bar, everybody's in, right? I get it. But as a company, you have a responsibility to be, to be accountable,
Right.
and have some sort of ticket system where somebody gets two, or whatever. I mean, you can't control everything, but if you're not controlling some things, then you just look negligent.
Right.
There's been so many parties where, and then if somebody leaves, what if they're hammered and they leave, and then it can become a criminal
Yeah.
thing, or
An
it can go
accident.
way beyond and then you
Mm-hmm.
could be held. So yeah, for me personally, yes, because my goal and my obligation is to mitigate and as much risk as possible on the front end. Yes, so I would.
Okay.
That's not going to be so favorite with your listeners, I'm sure, but
Yeah. Yeah. Who doesn't want an open bar? But when you're talking about compliance and companies, you can have the open bar elsewhere, not in a company environment.
yeah, I mean, I worked for a large media company. Most people
Mm-hmm.
know that. They're on TV and have a lot of networks. And I mean, we had the Christmas parties and we had the alcohol. Next thing you know, people are in the pool. Uh,
They
clothes are
skinny dip in.
clothes were optional.
Oh,
Things were happening. People were, yeah, it was pretty bad.
oh goodness.
Yeah, and we just had to cut out the alcohol altogether because
Yeah.
it got real bad, and people were leaving, because you couldn't control everything. People were leaving that really shouldn't have been behind the wheel of the car. And quite frankly, you don't have to be inebriated to not be in good shape to get behind the wheel of a car, right?
Yeah.
It can be
And
your
get a
response.
DUI or hurt somebody,
Correct.
get
And
into an
so
accident.
yeah, so I mean, we had to take that stance, and it was a hard stance to take because
Yeah.
trust me, parties weren't, as fun
Yeah.
without it. So we did without the alcohol altogether, but we were a very, very large media company,
Yeah.
and we could not take that risk. So after that, it's a fun Christmas party. Most of us didn't forget it though.
I bet. So, on another note, companies are struggling right now attracting, retaining talent. So, talk to me about some ways that a PEO and the HR team can help a company as far as attracting and retaining talent when it comes to HR, maybe salary benchmarking, if they're having a high turnover, doing some surveys, why they're having high turnover, and get some practices in place.
Yeah, those are really important. And I think what's really great is because a PEO deals with so many different companies and so many different industries, you can kind of look at what's going on in those
Exactly.
industries. And I think the biggest thing that we find, at least from an HR standpoint, is you have to be flexible. The workforce needs to be flexible. And yes, I mean, I think it's important to do salary surveys for sure. I think benefits are super important, to attract, and not only attract and retain, but you need to be an employer of choice. And you know what we're finding a lot, I will tell you, is what I'm seeing a lot more in like HR journals and just different, writings and online, and people want to be trusted. They don't want to work in a toxic work environment. And so I think what's really great is our teams can help to build policies and guidance and training programs around like culture and, best practices, and help to streamline your benefits so that they are more comprehensive in ways that you might not have even thought, right? Because a lot of people think, well, I provide health insurance, but maybe you don't contribute as, maybe you can contribute a little less on the health insurance, just a little bit, and make dental and vision free, or contribute to your 401k, or there's all kinds of creative ways that, that you can use to think of to make it more attractive to your work site employees, right? But yeah, it's never a one size fits all, Susanna. And that's the thing. It can be, oh, well, just write have a great culture. That's true. But there's things that you have to do. We can make sure that we're doing salary benchmarking to make sure that you're in line. Because look, we know that people may not leave jobs for money, and mostly they leave jobs because of managers and management, and then the toxicity, or if it's not a good culture. But let's be clear, salary is important. And in this day and age where it's hard to get workers and we have a shortage of workers, how do you get those people in the door? So you need to pay equitably. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're saying that in most cases, somebody's going to leave because of some type of toxic environment and management level. But as far as trying to attract the right talent, it's going to be a decision factor whether they take a job with you or the competitor down the street when you're talking about benefits that you're offering.
A total comp package. And I think companies, and that's another thing that PEOs can offer, is like a total comp statement, so that it's not that you just make $40,000 a year. Well, they contribute to your 401k, they pay your medical, you get this many PTO days or whatever the case may be. So it's like really looking at the total package, and we can help to put those together for, for the clients, which is great.
Speaking of PTO, I've heard a lot of companies offering unlimited PTO. What are your thoughts around that?
Oh, well, then why do you have it?
Okay.
In HR, we're typically not fans of it.
Okay.
But we have seen it trending.
Yeah.
But I think I think it makes it harder to hold people accountable to show up. And then what if you have a disciplinary problem with someone who maybe be in a protected class, who takes a lot of PTO, doesn't really work well, isn't great. How do you hold them accountable to show up and that they're working what they're supposed to be working? How do you hold them accountable? It makes it harder.
Yeah.
We're just not fans of it. I'm like,
Okay.
I would just have a super generous policy, because then what happens too is if you have an unlimited like PTO plan, and then the person also is on FMLA, has an FMLA claim and is eligible for FMLA, then they can be out for 12 weeks. Well, like, is the person ever going to work that year? Like, I mean, I guess I just don't know. And my other thing is, yes, it's unlimited, but if I'm in a protected class and you're not in a protected class, but you get approved for your PTO and I don't, can I make a claim? It's because I'm in a protected class. Like, so there's just not a lot of parameters around it. And
it's too many fine lines, and it just opens up some compliance and liability to employers.
But at the same time, this is a litigious day and age. Got to protect yourself. I don't think it offers the protection that a company's looking for. I think it can backfire on them.
Okay, fair enough. So we're hot topic right now. Everybody's talking about it, is the employer tax credit, the ERC tax credit. And I know that there's a lot of PEO companies that are filing on behalf of their clients and just offering credits versus cash. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, you can tell I love this subject because it's been a really hard one for folks to navigate just inside the PEO space and outside of it, right? So are you saying when they get their credit back, not to mean to apply the credit to like future payrolls and things like that?
Future invoices, just applying, giving you a credit. And it's like, that could tie you into that PEO company for 5 years, depending on what that credit could be.
I don't agree with it. It's their money. Give it to them. Yeah. And if it were me, if I was, to me, it would seem shady. I don't know. Maybe it's not. I'm not, I'm not in criminal law isn't my background, employment law is, and certainly nothing with taxes, but it just, to me, it sends the wrong message.
Mm-hmm.
And why do you need to keep that? There's an assumption there. It almost like, it makes me feel like you would be holding them captive to you. I want the clients
That's how
to be
I
with us
feel.
because we're providing the best possible service and we're the best fit for them.
Absolutely.
To me, it's like being in a bad relationship. And I want someone to want to be with me, not have to be
forced
with me.
forced to be with you. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
So I don't agree with it. I've seen it done, and firsthand, and I can tell you that clients absolutely hated it.
They don't like it. Yeah.
No, and they were like,
because what if they're not getting good service and they don't want to stay with you? You're held captive because they want their credits.
Yeah, I've also seen them not pay their interest either.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So it just, to me, no, I do not agree with that, but that's just my personal opinion.
Okay. Fair enough. Give them the cash, not the credits. That's a cop out, right?
Yeah. And you know what? If they're leaving you, they're not leaving you because you gave them their ERTC money back. They're leaving you because you're not fitting them anymore, or you're not providing, or you're breaching the contract that they signed up for, not providing the service. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I typically find that experts typically recommend, if you're with a PEO company, to do due diligence every 3 to 5 years. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's really important to do your due diligence. Mm-hmm. I think it's good on both ends. How frequent? In my mind, well, I get, you can't, I don't think it's a one size fits all, Susanna, because I think companies change, right? So I would say at minimum yearly. But if you're a company with a lot of change, you need to take a look at it, because, one of the things that COVID really, really taught us is how quickly your company can change literally overnight, which can take you from compliant to out of compliance. For instance, you can have all your exempt level employees, and then all of a sudden, remember, they were shutting a lot of things down and only keeping exempt level employees, but now the exempt level employees were now running the machines. Were they still exempt? No, because it's not about your category, it's about the job duties you're doing. So now a lot of them weren't exempt any longer, exempt level positions. So now they should have qualified for overtime. So I think that I would say minimum 1 year. If you are a company that's in a lot of change, or has a lot of change, or in a super growth mode, or a declination kind of like path. But yeah, I mean, 3 years for sure, I think is probably a pretty good average. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So last question. So I'm talking to companies all across the United States, and we're looking at what's going to be the best fit as far as their PEO company. I typically just do the analysis, the financials first, to see if it's going to be a fit, help them narrow it down to the top 2 or 3. And then from there, they start meeting with each PEO company. And I know everybody always says that they have HR level of service. And I always say it's like a flight. You're going to fly Delta and you're going to fly Spirit. They're going to get you to the place, the destination. Absolutely. You're going to get the bare bones, compliance, liability, but it's the way that you get there, the Delta versus Spirit.
And do they have good snacks? I mean, come on, let's be clear.
Yeah, exactly. So when they're talking and doing their due diligence with what PEO company that they're going to select, what are the right questions that they should be asking their HR professional team that's going to be assigned to them?
I think first and foremost, it's important to make sure you get the right fit, the right person with them, right? Because you can have an experienced or really experienced, account manager or HRC or whatever. But if there's not good chemistry between them, they don't work well together, don't communicate well together. It's just like any other relationship, right? It's not going to work. You can look great on paper, but that relationship, to me, that has to be key. So I think it's important when we're bringing a client on to make sure we get the right fit. Right? If you have somebody who's like has a lot of a super high level HR person at the client, and you bring in an entry level HRC, or maybe one that's not as versed, it's going to feel like for the client that they're having to pull more of the weight where the HRC should be. So I think that's important. I think it's important to know what what tools they have, and really what the expectation is going to be from the client side and from the PEO side, because that tends to be an area that gets very construed. And they're like, well, I thought you guys did this, or I thought, so I think it's really important to have clear expectations of what the PEO does, and what the expectations will be of the client. Because sometimes I've seen it where they're like, oh, well, I partnered with you and I didn't feel like I had to do anything. I thought you were doing all this. Well, that's not really how that works. So I think it's getting the right relationship, setting clear expectations. And then at that point, I think it's really important, and I think this falls off the radar a lot, and this is where I like, I tend to really love PEOs that really have, I don't know, maybe aren't as big or too big, because I really love where I think sometimes I wouldn't want them to get lost in the mix, but where they really can build those solid relationships with the clients. Because I think it's important to then develop an actual plan. And I don't mean, hey, I'm going to do this, this, and this. Look at, at least a 1 to 3 year plan of what you're going to put in place for them to not only get in compliance, be in compliance, but stay in compliance. Put that plan together. Find out what's important to them. Build the plan. If there's egregious needs immediately, those need to be addressed immediately.
Right.
But there's an accountability. So there's, hey, here's what I'm going to do for you, Susanna. But Susanna, in order for me to do this, I need this from you. And there's got to be like a timeline, SMART goals, all the things that we teach in HR, but we don't do ourselves. So I think it's really important. So those are my top 3. Make sure the relationship is a good fit. Make sure that clear expectations are set between what we do and what is expected of them. And then thirdly, putting that HR plan together, that compliance plan together with timelines, with accountability, not that, hey, I'll do your handbook, we'll do training. What does that look like? Let's set it up, and because each business is different.
Right.
So if I say, well, I'll start out and do handbooks, well, this might not be a good time to do their handbook right away. Like, they may have a huge project. They may be implementing a new software, but might not be the time to do it. So it's really getting to know the client and put that plan together based on their needs.
Yes. Okay. And excuse me, you mentioned that tools. And I know, let's talk a little bit about that, because I know each PEO company for their HR team have different tools in place. What are some of the tools as an HR professional that you like to work with that the PEO companies have as far as tools?
Well, certainly a handbook builder. That's important to me. I mean, that's just number one. And I like a handbook builder that integrates with a platform that can automate. Let's be clear. I chased paper many years when I was an HR professional behind the desk, right?
Right.
We made an update to our handbook, and then I had to run around to 175 people, make sure I had everybody, come on, who has time for that? A handbook builder that has an automated where you can then send that out to everybody, and it's an automatic signature, and it can track if they've read it, signed it, and all the things, right? That's important. Obviously an applicant tracking system is very important. A learning management system is very important. With all the legislation and the required trainings that, a lot of states have and others are following suit, it's important to have that so you can keep track of that as well. Again, things that I used to do manually in my little spreadsheet years and years ago. Those are some tools right there. And then, I think it's important to have surveys and then strategic level initiatives that the companies that, they have the basics, they partner with PEO because they need some of the basics, but then they may need some higher level strategic level initiatives that most companies at a PEO don't need. It's not shoving it down them, but it's if they need that, having some of those tools. That could be even like succession planning. A lot of companies don't have succession plans.
Right.
It's scary, but they don't.
Yeah.
A lot of them, believe it or not, don't have handbooks. And I'll tell you what, probably 99.9% of them don't have job descriptions. So then when they get a FLSA claim from the DOL, they get a claim and they're not paying people, correctly or categorizing them correctly. And next thing you know, what's in your handbook? What does your job description look like? And they don't have it. So it's, those.
What kind of fines would they get for that?
Oh, well, Oh, I mean, it can
Average,
be
get anywhere between.
thousands. I mean, I would, it would depend on the size of the company,
Yeah.
but like if you're not classified correctly, they can go back 2 years. So if you are
Oh,
classified as an exempt level employee because the owner just wants to pay you salary and doesn't want to pay you overtime because they think they have a choice and they don't, and some of them just don't care, they can go back 2 years to make that up. And if they think it's intentional, they give punitive damages. They can go back 3 years. So, there are companies out there that, just want to pay somebody's salary and just say, well, I'm paying you salary and the person's working 80 hours a week.
mm-hmm.
And it's their word against yours if you don't. And in most cases, you're not tracking an exempt level employee's time. So if I go and say, hey, I'm working 60 hours a week and they're only working 30, but they're getting their salary. I've seen it happen. Guess what? You're going to have to make up that overtime. You're going to have to, and they can go back 2 years and sometimes 3 times if they think it's intentional. So it's,
Wow.
yeah, I mean,
It could be pretty significant then. Double
oh,
digits,
oh,
hundreds, a thousand, do you
oh,
think?
keep
Yeah.
going. Just keep going up. I mean, yeah. Let's put it this way. A country club in West Palm years ago got fined $250,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
How many employees approximately?
Uh, I want to say like 120 employees, but you know what
Okay.
they got fined for? And this was interesting. They got fined because they had, now it's not illegal to, but we certainly don't recommend it, auto punching for breaks for their lunch break.
Oh,
And it was like, well, did you see that everybody didn't take a lunch break? No. How do you know they didn't take a lunch break? Yeah. So it's not illegal to do that, but it's really not in your best interest to do that unless you lock the floor, whatever it is, and nobody can go back in or whatever. But yeah, auto punching for breaks, not a great idea. $250,000.
wow. That's a lot for just
Mm-hmm.
auto punching.
Yeah, I mean, think
Wow.
about it. If a country club, right? Like you can have some high level executives, but the majority of the people that run your country club
Or
are,
seller or
what is it,
hourly,
40, fifty
hourly
thousand
folks.
dollars an
Yeah.
hour, right? So basically, you had to pay the equivalent of 5 of your employees in a
Wow.
penalty, and that was
Wow.
small. Could have been worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much,
Oh my
Kim. This is
gosh.
so helpful. We're going to have you come on again. I certainly do appreciate your time. Do
Let's
you
do
have any
it.
final thoughts to add before we wrap up?
I'm just so grateful for the opportunity. Susanna, when I found the PEO space, and I like to say this because when I found the PEO space, I found it by accident. And I didn't even know 16 years ago that this kind of service existed. And I just remember to myself, you know, if I had this type of support from the PEO, what I could have accomplished in my role. And look, I was a successful HR professional and I pride myself on that, but I was still one person trying to do it all. And I
Right.
was working around the clock, couldn't get things done. And the funny thing is when I did find out about it, I thought it would be so expensive. And it wasn't.
Hmm.
And that's what was amazing. I was like, for a mere fraction of the cost to get a body and be responsible for a body and the taxes and the bennies and the pay and all the things, literally for a fraction of the price, I could have had an amazing support team. I mean, so, and they're not just getting their HR professional, they're getting a team of compliance people behind them, which is invaluable, invaluable. So I'm a
Excellent.
huge
So for
fan of it.
all my viewers that are not currently using a PEO company, listen to what Kim's saying. Huge value for the fraction of the price. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I would love to come back on.
Yeah.
And
I
I'll
would
make
love
it
to
my
have you.
fate.
Okay. Sounds
It's been
good. Well, I appreciate your time. I'll let you get back to your day, and look forward to the next one.
Thank you so much, Susanna. I appreciate it. Have a good
Thank
one.
you.
All right.
Bye.
Take care. Thanks. Bye-bye.